Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I can also say good afternoon, good evening to all people coming from different parts of the world. Welcome to Taqiim webinar on machinery equipment valuation for insurance purposes. So housekeeping issues, if you look at the taskbar below your screen, you see an icon written interpretation. If you want to hear this webinar in English, please click on that icon. You see English and Arabic. So please select English if you want to hear the webinar in English. If you want to hear the webinar in Arabic, please select Arabic. So I'll just give you a moment to select the language of your choice. Thank you. Right, hopefully you have selected your language of your choice. We've got our guest today. His name is Gabriel Karidzà. Is going to present on the machinery equipment valuation for insurance purposes. Gabriel is an experienced risk engineer, accredited senior appraiser with ASA, chartered machinery valuer. Currently, Gabriel is the managing director of Minet Risk Management and Consulting Private Limited in Botswana. So he's going to do the presentation. Now I hand over to Gabriel. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ruka. Thank you, everyone, for being able to join onto this webinar. And it's a pleasure to be meeting you all on this webinar. And I'm going to take you through this course, and it's in relation to machinery and equipment insurance valuation. All right. So basically what we are going to cover in terms of this, the topic in terms of this course is the issues that are relating to the link between risk management and insurance, as well as the way they are related to asset valuation. We are also going to discuss things that are related to insurance in terms of us being able to know what we normally call domain knowledge, some knowledge which is basic, which is knowledge that is relevant for us to be able to do insurance valuation. That knowledge, it relates to insurance contracts and the basic insurance principles. We'll talk about them as they relate to valuations of machinery and equipment. We'll also talk about the basis of claim settlement, again in consideration to how it relates to valuation of assets. The other things that we'll talk about is the key takeaways. That's before commencing an insurance valuation. We'll also talk about information needed to carry out an insurance valuation and the requirements of the valuation report. The reasons for that insurance valuation and the actual process that one has to follow when carrying out the process of valuation, as well as the uniqueness of insurance valuation, why it's so different to the other types of insurance of valuations that we are so used to. Then lastly, we'll just do a small case study just to see how some of the things that we would have discussed relate to this case study. So with that, I'm going to get straight into issues that are related to risk management and how it relates to valuation. What I am putting in there, it's what is called a basic risk matrix. So for any insured or for any client that we deal with, whether it's a client that we want to value assets for, or any other client for that matter, there is always things that we look at in terms of risk management. And the risk itself is categorized into frequency and into severity. In other words, the frequency that we are talking about, sometimes some call it likelihood, the severity, some call it impact. That's the impact of the risk. So you realize that when you get to risk management, all the other aspects of risk that can come into play, all the risks that you can find within the clients, within the insured, they are categorized into 4 categories. There is risk that you can accept and manage. That risk is a risk low frequency and low severity. It's in category 1 in that risk matrix. Then there is risk that has got high frequency and low severity. That risk is in category 2. And if you have got that risk, the way that you address that risk is to treat it so that you reduce the frequency. That's one. If the risk is in one category 2, you treat so that it goes to category 1. You then accept and manage the risk. If risk is in category 4, you avoid. It's a risk that is for high frequency, high severity. Where I'm interested in is a risk that is in category 3, the risk that has got high severity and low frequency. So these are the things that can happen once in a while, but they result in a business being significantly affected. There you transfer, and one of the methods of transferring that risk is insurance. With that, that's how we get to insurance, and that's how we want to talk about what it is that it relates to when it comes to the value at risk. Having taken insurance or intending to take insurance in that category, which is category 3, we then say, where is the link with asset valuation? So we have got the first thing that we have is an insurance contract. So an insurance contract is between the insurer and the insured, right? So the insurer is those companies or entities that accept the risk, and the insured is usually the clients that we are valuing assets for. So there's this contract that exists, which is an insurance contract. The insurer promises to pay the insured, and with that promise, it's a promise to put back the insured on the same financial position as if there was no loss. So where the client was before the loss, right? Considering all the terms and conditions of the contract. So this is in exchange with a premium that is paid by the insured, and that premium is commensurate to the value at risk. It's actually something that relates to, if you have got a high figure of the value at risk, you also pay more in terms of premium. So insurance is usually called the pooling of risks, because a number of the entities, a number of the insureds, they are paying premium into this. So where our interest is on the value at risk. So this is the value at risk that we need to determine. On the right there, you see that I've mentioned that machinery and equipment valuers, they play a role in coming up with a professional opinion of the value at risk, right? It is the duty of the insured to declare what we call the sum insured figures that reflect the correct replacement or reinstatement values in line with the basis of claim settlement as covered in the insurance policy. So this is where us valuers come into play. We are supposed to assist the insured in coming up with the correct sum insured. We are supposed to do a valuation that reflects a fair value at risk. Because remember, I've indicated that at the end, the clients are supposed to pay a premium that are premiums that are commensurate with the value at risk, right? So valuers are there to advise clients in terms of this value at risk, but however, without forgetting the parameters that relate to that value at risk. There is an insurance contract that is there. There is something that is put in the contract in relation to replacement or reinstatement, and there is the basis of claim settlement. It's inside that policy. So we need to start with that policy, what's in the policy and what's covered in terms of that, so that we are able to determine this value at risk. So with that, for this contract to be a valid contract of insurance, there are some principles that are supposed to be followed. And these principles, they are principles that will make this contract valid. If those principles are not complied with, there's no contract of insurance. And I'm going to, although there are a number of principles that are there, I'm going to focus more on principles that are in relation to asset values. And one of those principles is the insurable interest. This one, for us valuers, it should not be something that is complicated to understand. The interest that is there is something that is very critical for the contract of insurance to exist. So basically, when we are saying insurable interest, we are talking of the legal right to insure out of a financial relationship that is recognized by law between the insured and the subject matter of insurance. So there should be a financial relationship between the asset that we are saying we are insuring and the person or the entity that is insuring. So there should be a financial relationship. In other words, for insurance to be, for this contract to be a viable contract, the person who is insuring or the entity that is insuring should lose some financial value if there is a loss of that asset. So insurers, they do not insure what we call just the brick and mortar. They don't insure the physical asset per se. What they are interested in is the subject matter of the contract, the relationship between the policyholder, meaning the person taking out insurance, and the relationship of that person holder, that policyholder to the subject matter of insurance. So insurable exists. It should exist at policy inception. It should exist during the claim, when the claim happens. So basically what we are saying there is there should be a relationship. If you are, just as an example, you are a person who is using a car on a daily basis, if you lose that car, there's a financial effect to that. So there is a relationship, you are able to insure it. Otherwise, if there is no loss, insurance doesn't allow you to insure such an asset. This is meant to prevent use of policies for gambling and speculative purposes. So when we do our valuation of assets, we are interested in the interest that any entity or the insured, whoever is the insured, is in that asset. So that's where our interest. What is the interest? If you are renting, your interest is in renting. If you are owning, you are the actual owner of the asset, your interest is in the full asset value. So this is where the insurable interest comes into play, right? Then with that, we discuss the next principle of insurance. This is the principle of indemnity. The principle of indemnity, it is basically all the insurance contracts that are in place, they are based on a principle of indemnity. And the principle of indemnity says that the insured will get exactly the same value of what he or she has lost, not a penny more or a penless. What insurance does is putting the person or the entity on the same position that they were in before the loss happens. Out of insurance, you don't get more, you don't get less. You are supposed to get exactly what you lost. And with that, insurance pay the insured's interest in whatever is lost. That is the reduction in interest is what is paid for. So again, you'll see that there is a relationship in terms of indemnity and in terms of the value that you are insuring for. You cannot insure an asset for a figure that is way higher than its value. You are also not supposed to insure for a figure that is way lower. There are implications to that. Valuers become critical in coming up with an opinion of value that is reflective of the asset and the insurance. So this is another principle that has to be complied with in order for the contract of insurance to be viable. On to the next, another principles of insurance that are there. These ones, I'm not going to discuss them in detail, but there are other contracts, other relevant principles of insurance that are in place. There is what is called utmost good faith, which indicates that whoever is insured is supposed to disclose material facts. It's supposed to disclose whatever, something that is major that would have changed within the course of the insurance. And also the other relevant principle of insurance is the principle of contribution. This principle of contribution, it says that if the insured takes insurance for one asset with more than one insurer, all those insurers, they contribute to paying if there is a loss. But that contribution, the total contribution of all these insurers should never be higher than the value of the asset. So basically, if you insure your asset with more than one insurer, you are going to share to get a portion of that payment. It doesn't matter that you were paying a lot of premium or you were insuring full value for all those insurers. They will contribute towards just the value of the assets. No insured is expected to gain out of insurance, but you are supposed to be back to the same position that you were. So this brings about the issue of co-insurance. Co-insurance is when more than one insurer is taking the risk that is there. So where you have got maybe 2 or 3 insurance companies that are insuring one asset, so that's co-insurance. So there are a number of guiding principles that are there that make the contract of insurance viable. So without a valid contract of insurance, even the evaluation that we do becomes irrelevant. So there should be a valid contract of insurance, and you do evaluation of insurance in line with the valid contract of insurance, right? Then getting into the actual contents of this contract of insurance and the clauses that are there that are relevant to insurance. These clauses are very important for us valuers to understand. We need to know them so that when we do this valuation, we know where our valuation affects the contract of insurance. So within the contract of insurance, there is what is called the operating clause. The operating clause is the first section of that insurance contract, and it talks about what it is that we are insuring. If we are insuring plant and machinery, if we are insuring motor vehicles, it specifies exactly the things that are insured. So it also specifies what we are insuring. If we are insuring assets in case of a fire, in case of flood, in case of any loss that can happen, this is specified in the insurance contract under the operating clause. Right? And after the operating clause, there is also a section that relates to exclusions. the section of exclusions, it talks about what is not insured. This section is also very relevant, especially for us valuers. Assuming you are doing evaluation for insurance purposes for plant and machinery, for argument's sake, if the policy is saying the foundations are excluded, it gives an indication that when you are doing that valuation for insurance, for the specific contract of insurance, that is the foundations are supposed to be excluded, the value of those foundations are supposed to be excluded. This is just a typical example. Whatever is excluded in a contract of insurance should not be included in terms of aggregating the values of those assets when we are carrying out that valuation. So the next critical aspect of the contract of insurance relates to the conditions that are incorporated in that contract of insurance. And one, in terms of those conditions, the rules that govern the application of the policy. So these are the rules that determine how this contract is happening. Just as an example, if you have got an insured, in case of a claim, the insured is supposed to notify the insurer as soon as the claim happens. That's a typical example of a condition. There are also conditions that are implied and those that are expressed. The implied conditions, they relate to some of the principles that we have mentioned before, principles of insurance. And the express conditions are the ones that are specifically written within this contract. Right. So after the conditions that are put in there, and all the express conditions are complied with, the implied as well are complied with, then the contract of insurance becomes a valid contract. There's also, after the conditions, there's the warranty. A warranty of insurance is an undertaking by the insured that a certain state of affairs will or will not continue, or that something shall or shall not be done throughout the duration of the contract. So this warranty is basically an undertaking by the insured that the insured shall comply with the requirements or some clause that is supposed to be complied with in such a way that if it's breached, there is no contract of insurance. I'll give you an example of a warranty that will be there. Let's say you are taking a policy and you are insuring assets that are highly flammable and there's a huge risk of fire. Right? So a warranty can be an undertaking that you are not going to mix two chemicals that are flammable that can react with each other to cause a fire. So if you mix those, the policy becomes invalid. So that's a typical example of a warranty, where a warranty can be saying if you have got a sprinkler system in the building, it can be saying you shall service that sprinkler system without fail. If you fail to service it, there's no contract that is valid. So those are typical examples of warranties that these policies can put in place. And with that, the last aspect of an insurance contract that is very critical is the policy schedule. This policy schedule is something that makes the contract personal, or that makes the contract specific to a client. Usually, insurers, they've got a general or a standard policy that is in place, and then attach what they call a policy schedule. What is of key importance is that this policy schedule is like a schedule that we have within our valuation report. So when we do the valuation that we do, clients, in most instances, they take those schedules that we do, the list of assets that would have valued, they attach that list of assets to the insurance contract and they form part of the schedule. What is also very vital there is that when a valuer gets to that, if you miss some assets that are supposed to be included within the valuation exercise, that can have a detriment effect, a challenge. It can result in assets not being insured while clients will be thinking all their assets are included. So those are some of the things that the valuers should be careful or should take note that when they do evaluation, they are producing a schedule that represents what's exactly on site. Because in some instances, in most instances actually, this schedule becomes part of the insurance contract. So it personalizes the contract. It turns an anonymous document into an individual contract. The sums insured are incorporated next to that list of assets. And this schedule is normally reissued from time to time to keep it up to date. So if clients acquire new assets, that schedule is updated. So this is where the link sometimes gets into perspective when it comes to what valuers do and how their schedules end up being part of the insurance contract. Then on to just the general differentiation between what is called an all risks policy versus a fire and allied peril policy. Usually there are two major types of policies that exist, and the first one being an all risks policy. And this covers, when it says all risks, it covers everything, all the risks that are there except what is excluded. So basically what this policy does is it focuses on the exclusions. So as a valuer, it is vital to know the exclusions that are in this policy, and those are the only things that are not insured. So in all risks policy, it just says everything is covered except what we are excluding. Then there is also the policy, which is the fire and allied perils policy. This one, it specifies what is covered. So you realize when we have got a fire and allied peril policy, it talks to what exactly is covered, unlike an all risks policy, which just says we are covering everything except A, B, and C. The fire and allied perils policy, it actually mentions the things that are covered. So a valuer, machinery and the equipment valuer should scrutinize what is covered, what is excluded, in order to align the sum insured figures to the valuation that is in place. Okay. Now getting to the actual details of basis of valuation. Basis of valuation, which is also the claim settlement basis, and how there are some modifications to indemnity. When we say indemnity, remember we are talking about putting back the insured to the exactly same position that the insured was before there was a claim. So within that policy, there will be a provision that will be there, which is a section that talks about the basis of claim settlement. This is probably the most important section for a valuer when it comes to this policy. So within that basis of claim settlement, there is what is called the reinstatement clause. So insurers, they pay a new for old, but excluding betterment. So this is the general standard within the insurance market globally, and this relates to plant and machinery. When it comes to plant and machinery, insurers in general, they pay a new for old, but excluding betterment. So you will notice that this is more like a modification to the general indemnity policy that we were talking about, the general indemnity principle. But there is no improvement on the actual situation. If there was an asset, if there was a machine before a fire, there will be that machine after the fire. So that's what the reinstatement clause will be saying. So basically the insurers are paying new for old. They are giving, when there is an asset that is old, that is insured, the insurers will then pay for the new asset, replaced with the new asset, but without changing the specification or the capacity that that asset can deliver. It's still the same asset. It's only that they are replacing the old one with the new one. So this clause, if it's in the policy, the restatement clause, if it's in the policy, it means a valuer should take note that the values that are being given for purposes of insurance valuation, they are new, they are reflective, the new for old, they are reflective of what will be the replacement of that asset without changing its capacity or changing its specification, but considering the asset as new, excluding any betterment that can happen. You cannot increase the capacity. Right. Then there are also policies that are called value-based. This usually relates to assets that are not common, unique assets, and there is need to determine the reasonable figure of that asset in advance. This one, it will be a figure that is reflective of the condition of the asset, the value of the asset as is, considering its age the way it is. These are the valued assets. So you'll notice that for valued, sorry, these are the valued policies. So you will notice that for valued policies, the agreed value is agreed in advance. So a valuer might be requested to carry out a valuation that is reflective of assets that are covered under valued policies. A typical example of an asset that can be put under valued policies is an aircraft. An aircraft is not like a common asset. You realize that sometimes the replacement values of those assets, they are not readily available. They are not things that are just common. They don't want, insurers would not want to based on new for old, but they base them on the condition of the asset the way it is. So aircrafts are insured under the basis of agreed value basis. So a valuer can come in there as a professional, do an evaluation of the asset, considering the condition that it is in. Then that value is the figure that will be used. And when there is a claim, there are no disputes. The figure is agreed in advance. So these policies are called agreed value basis. Right. The other things that are there is there are some additional costs that are related to surveyors, architects, or engineers carrying out some special work, engineering work, professional work in relation to replacing an asset. All those costs that are related to that additional cost, they are covered by insurance. So when a valuer is carrying out evaluation for insurance, such figures should be included in the replacement figures of assets. So basically, the reason why insurers come up with a new for old is to avoid time-consuming disputes in relation to value and in relation to calculating depreciation. So these reinstatement clauses, they are there to ensure that there are less disputes in terms of calculating depreciation, and they are there in terms of making sure that the disputes of values are also reduced. So that's why there will be some modifications to issues of indemnity when it comes to insurance. And these clauses, they are very important for a valuer before a valuer starts carrying out work. There is need for a valuer to be aware of the policy that is there if that valuation is carried out for a specific insurance policy. And also in general, like I indicated that globally, reinstatement clauses are there in all these 4 assets risk policies. So where there is a reinstatement clause, insurers, they do put an indemnity based on new for old. If you lose your machine, you're going to get a new machine, but without any betterment. So this is one of the bases, the critical basis of insurance. And just to get into more perspective in relation to valuation and claim settlement, the valuation itself will be estimating the probable financial loss to machinery of comparable output, productivity, quality at the given point, considering the policy terms and conditions. So take note there that it's considering the policy terms and conditions. So those policy terms and conditions that we were talking about, the details that we were talking about are the critical terms that would determine how evaluation should be carried out. So the valuer will be there to determine the value at risk of a plant, the value of at risk being the total asset values that we are talking about. Then there is also the issue of maximum possible loss of value of physical assets measured against those terms and conditions. So these are the things that a valuer will be supposed to come up with. Then in terms of, again, the reinstatement value that I mentioned, is the amount under the policy to be calculated, and it shall be the cost of replacing or reinstating on the same site or any other site with property of the same kind or type, but no superior to or more intensive than the insured property when new on date of loss. So the reinstatement clause, again, insurers pay new for old, excluding betterment. Normally, when it comes to the basis of valuation, normally they include the foundation, they include any other costs. As per my prior discussion, they include the design, the engineering, architectural costs. However, the reinstatement clause is very important to look at so that you see the specific items that are excluded and those that are included. So when you carry out evaluation, you have to be cognizant of those specific items that are included and those that are excluded. They form part of your value, right? So there is in line with that, the reproduction cost new figure, which is the cost of reproducing a new replica of a property with the same or closely similar material. It becomes relevant because we are talking about reinstating the asset back to the way it was. So when you are replacing with the same asset, that's the reproduction cost new that we are looking at, or you are looking at the replacement cost new, which is the current cost of replacing with a similar asset. These are the figures that are relevant when you are carrying out an insurance valuation. And you will notice also that sometimes there is talk of what is called insurance replacement cost. Again, it is just terminology. That insurance replacement cost, it will be talking of the costs of replacing as new, again, as defined by the policy, less replacement of cost new of items that are excluded in the policy. Take note there, it is very important to know items that are excluded by the policy because they do not form part of the valuation. So the policy wording is very important because it then tells valuers what is excluded and what is not excluded within the policy. So there are some instances where insurable replacement costs depreciated or market values are used, but this is not very common, but it's not something that we can say it can never happen, because there are some policies that are based on this. I'll give you an example. When you are insuring motor vehicles are insured based on market value. The reason being that the market value of motor vehicles is very easy to determine. There's a ready market. You can compare vehicles that are there that are old. They are there in the market. So disputes in terms of calculating depreciation, it's not something that is very common when it comes to valuation of motor vehicles. So motor vehicles, they are insured based on what is called market value and not based on a reproduction cost new or replacement cost new. So it is important to take note that it's not always the case where you are considering new for old or where you are considering agreed values, but there is also market value that can be used in the case of motor vehicles. So when you are carrying out evaluation of motor vehicles, it is important to take note that the figure that becomes relevant is the market value of a motor vehicle for when it comes to insurance replacement cost. I have included in there typical provisions in a policy so that we are fully aware of the clauses that exist within these policies. So this is an extract from the actual policy. One of the policies that I took this extract from, it will be specifying exactly what is covered under that basis of insurance, basis of claim settlement. So I just going through that section, you will notice that it's specific, that it's in respect of replacement cost. So item 1 there, it says the insured shall have the option to rebuild or replace the insured property by construction or type superior to or more intensive than its condition when new, provided the amount of settlement does not exceed the amount that would have been payable, but for such superior or more intensive construction. Obviously, insurance jargon might appear complicated, but just to make it simple, what the insurers are saying there, or what the policy is saying, is that you can be allowed to insure with whatever asset that you can insure for, even if it's superior, provided the cost of that asset is not higher than the cost of the less superior asset. This in reality is not very common. If an asset is superior, chances are that the value of that asset is higher than the less superior asset. So insurers are just saying, you can decide and say, I'm going to buy another superior asset. If you can find it cheaper, they will not stop you from buying it. The critical thing is the sum insured figure. It doesn't have to be higher than what is insured for, right? Then the other aspect is item 2, insured shall have the option of replacement with electrical or mechanical equipment having technological advantages and or representing an improvement in function or forming part of the program of system enhancement. Again, there is a clause there that says, provided the amount of settlement does not exceed the amount that would have been payable for such enhancement. So insurers are not going to pay for anything that is extra. Insurers can just allow a client to buy an asset that is superior if that asset is found at a cheaper figure. So they will not deny you that. What is very critical is the basis of insurance should be the one that is reflective of the specifications of that asset. So if you then get in and find a cheaper asset, it's still not a problem. So in terms of this, what valuers can then do, or how it relates to valuation, is if it happens that the replacement costs of assets have gone down, and there is a superior asset that has got probably the same replacement costs with the asset that has got lower specification or superior, it can still be used as a replacement asset, provided its cost is not higher than the figure for its replacement is not higher than what the less superior asset is. Then there is also some specific clauses that are included in insurance, like item 3, the insured may elect to obtain loss settlement on replacement cost basis when the property is lost, destroyed, or damaged, has been replaced. Otherwise, settlement is on cash value basis, right? So you can replace your asset. This is the normal way that we're talking about. You can replace it with another asset when it's lost. But if you do not intend to replace it, and you are saying, I'm going to get money and I just want cash, they will give you what is called cash value basis, which will then deduct the depreciation, and it becomes more complicated. So it's always necessary to, insurers usually prefer replacement or reinstatement of that particular asset. Then the other item that is covered under item 4 is the insured may elect to replace the property lost, destroyed, or damaged at an alternative site, provided the amount of settlement shall not be more than the cost of replacing at the original site. Again, when you are doing evaluation, the basis is on the replacement of that asset at that same site, right? So if there is an aspect of possibility of replacing the asset at another or a site that is not the same as where it is, insurers will not pay for that extra cost of going to another new asset. So you find that as a valuer, if you are looking at the plant and there is a possibility that that plant, when it comes to replacement, it will be built at another site, or the additional costs that are related to building at the other site are not part of what insurers will replace. So as a valuer, there is need to consider replacement costs or reproduction costs at that same location if the cost of replacing and or reproducing is the same. Otherwise, the moment you go to another location and there are additional costs related to the other location, insurers will not pay for those extra costs of relocate of installing an asset at an alternative position. They only pay if the cost is the same as having put up the plant at the same location. So these are the clauses. This is a typical clause that is there in an insurance contract. This is a typical clause that the valuers should be aware of before they carry out evaluation. So this is a single typical example. There is another, this one is the second example of the basis of a claim settlement as well. And just to get into the clauses of this, it talks of basis of claim settlement on buildings, machinery, plant, and all other property and contents other than those specified below. And it talks of cost of reinstatement, replacement, and repair in accordance with the provisions of the reinstatement or replacement clause. And it says, provided that if the insured elects to claim the indemnity value of any damaged property, the insurer will pay the insured the value of such property at the time of the happening of the damage or at its option reinstate, replace, or repair such property or any other part thereof. So again, the basis of settlement here, we are talking of reinstatement and replacement. So in general, the basis of a claim settlement and the basis of valuation when it comes to insurance policies, it's new for old, which is replacing the old one with the new one. But however, there is a clause that is normally incorporated in when we are doing valuation of mobile plants or other mobile mining equipment. And that clause is important again for valuers to be aware of. When you are doing valuation of mobile plant, policies worldwide, most of them generally they've got a clause that says if mobile plant is 5 years or more in terms of its age at the time of loss or damage, market value or the cost of purchasing a replacement machine that takes into consideration the age and condition will be used. So this is no longer new for old. For mobile equipment that have got a life of 5 years or more, this clause is in many policies that are there worldwide in terms of valuation of assets, in terms of valuation of mobile plant. So that makes it even more important for insurers, for valuers, not just to assume that doing evaluation is just new for old, or when we are doing evaluation for motor vehicles, it's just market value. In terms of mobile equipment, those that have got a life of 5 years or more, you'll be valuing based on the market value. Those that have got a life of less than 5 years, they will be based on a replacement for new for old. So this is a clause that is there, and it's important to take note before valuers just plug in figures that are not relevant to the policy that is it. All right. So again, getting into the other provisions that are there, we spoke about the agreed values. These are sometimes they are figures that are declared in advance. Then there's I want to highlight the section that relates to, again, replacement or reinstatement. There are some items that I've put in bold. I hope you'll be able to see. I know it's the font might be small, but I'll read through so that at least we are quite aware of some of the critical sections of this. Where I put items in bold there says the work of rebuilding or replacing or repairing or restoring, as the case may be carried out upon any site and in a manner suitable to the requirements of the insured, but subject to the liability of the insurer, not being thereby increased, must be commenced and carried out with reasonable dispatch, failing which the insurer shall not be prejudiced by the said delay and shall not be liable to make any payment for additional expenses incurred by the said delay. So this clause, what it's saying is that if there is a loss in terms of machinery and equipment, the insured, the owner of those assets, should not delay in terms of replacement of those assets. If they delay in a replacement, let's say an asset is being imported from a country, if the delay is on the part of the insured, insurers are not going to pay for that extra delay. Insurers will only pay for what is normal delivery time. So when you are carrying out evaluation again, all those special delays, all those delays that are outside the norm, insurers are not concerned about that. They will not pay for those extra costs. So those extra costs should not be included within the valuation. So that's one aspect that the insurers are saying there. And that's what the policy says of the basis of settlement. And again, the other section that is in bold, it says the liability of the insurer shall not exceed the sum representing the cost which the insurer would have been called upon to pay for reinstatement if such property had been wholly damaged. So the insurer, there is a limit to what the insurer will pay. That limit is the sum insured, and that sum insured is what is determined by the value. Right? So the insured may elect to reinstate or replace destroyed property with dissimilar property, that is the property that is not exactly the same, provided it is used for the purpose of the business described in the schedule. If the insured elects to reinstate or replace destroyed property with dissimilar property, the insurer shall pay the lesser of, number one, the cost of dissimilar property. Number two, the amount equal to the replacement cost, which would have been payable if the destroyed property had been reinstated or replaced with similar property in a condition equal to, but not better than the, not better or more intensive than its condition when new. So basically, the policy is saying you can opt to replace with an asset that is not exactly the same as your own asset, but insurers again are not going to pay that extra cost if there is an extra cost. So as a valuer, the main basis should be exactly the specifications that are of that asset that you are valuing. Any replacement asset can be used as long as the value is not way higher, is not higher than what it's supposed to be in terms of replacing the existing asset. So these are the clauses that are there within this policy. And the other aspect that we need to take note of is costs that are related to complying with the bylaws or regulation or government requirements when there is a loss. So the policy specifies those costs and the policy pays for such costs. That's the insurance policy. It pays for such costs. Let's say you lose your assets, you lose your plant and machinery assets, and for some reason, there is a compliance that is supposed to be met within the bylaws, within the regulations, as it relates to the loss that has happened. Those extra costs are part of the replacement cost of an asset. So this is what this section says, which says this policy extends to include the extra cost of reinstatement, including demolition or dismantling the property insured necessarily incurred to comply with the requirements of any act of parliament or regulations made thereunder, or any bylaw or regulations or requirements of any municipal or other statutory authority, subject to the following. There's always a clause that then says, yes, insurers will pay for this, but what is the clause that limits this figure? It can't be a figure that is just a way what is normally the norm in terms of the replacement cost. So the limit there is the amount recoverable shall not include additional costs incurred in complying with any such act or regulation or bylaw or requirement with which the insured has been required to comply with prior to happening of the damage. So basically what this clause is saying, all those costs that are related to complying with the government regulations and maybe dismantling those assets. If there is a, let's say there's a fire, we are supposed to comply by regulations that are there to check out that equipment, to replace it, to clear the for that. Insurers will pay for that. But however, insurers will not pay for anything that any extra costs that the insured was supposed to comply with before that loss has happened. So anything which is outside the norm, insurers will not pay for it. Let's say the insured was supposed to comply by a particular regulation before the loss, and you then incorporate that and say, I've been paid because I was supposed to comply with this regulation, and it has nothing to do with the fire that has happened, insurers will not pay. So when you are carrying out this valuation, when you are looking at a replacement cost of assets, it is important to take note of what may happen in terms of dismantling costs, rubble costs, and all that will require compliance with the law. All those extra costs, they can be part of the replacement cost of the assets. Right, and in terms of the other basis of claim settlement that we need to take note of, the items that are very critical in terms of the policy schedule. There's also the basis of claim settlement in relation to the full sum insured in a normal basis, as well as the basis of claim settlement in terms of what we call the first loss policy. I want us to discuss these two. I want us to discuss what it means to insure on full sum basis and on first loss policy. So when you say insurance on full sum basis, this is the normal insurance that considers the full value of the assets. So when the assets that you are insuring are worth a particular figure, consider the total of those assets. Or there is also an option which is called first loss policy. First loss policy assumes that if there is an incident that happens, it might not wipe out all the assets that are insured. It assumes the maximum foreseeable loss, what we call the maximum foreseeable loss. It assumes that if this loss is going to happen, not all the assets are going to be lost. There are particular assets that will be lost. If it's a plant, assume you are valuing a large refinery. In some instances, it's very possible to look at it and say, if the fire happens, it's not going to away all the assets. And that is called a first loss policy. And for that first loss policy, there is need to calculate what is called maximum foreseeable loss. And this is usually applicable to large risks. So the maximum foreseeable loss is calculated for large risks. It takes into perspective the valuation of the concentration of risk at a particular section that will be wiped out by a single event. But however, the insured are supposed to declare the full value of the assets that are there, but insurers will take note of what the worst that can happen in terms of one incident. Right? So when there is the underinsurance, what is called an average clause that will take into place. Basically, insurers will not pay for the full value if the client is not insuring all the assets that have got a value that is commensurate with the value at risk. So the first loss policy, it assumes the maximum foreseeable loss for large risks. Other policies that are usually general, they also take into consideration what is called the full sum insured figures. So valuers will take note of that, and valuers will require. I will explain later why this maximum foreseeable loss is important for valuers to be aware of. Then the agreed value is the agreed value where the amount is agreed in advance. And the other last aspect that is there that we need to take note of is an aspect that relates to value added tax. repairs and replacements of assets, they attract VAT. And when you are coming up with a sum insured figure or evaluation for these insurance purposes, there is need to exclude this VAT figure if the business is a registered entity that can claim back that VAT, right? Because it's claimed back, there's no need to include it on the sum insured figure. But however, if there are any other payables in respect of various countries that are not covered, they have to be included. If a business is not registered to claim back the VAT, it means the VAT portion should be part of the sum insured fee. It should be part of the evaluation. So why would you want evaluation? Why is the professional evaluation necessary? So I put in there more like a flow diagram for us to appreciate why evaluation is necessary for insurance purposes. So we have indicated that an insurer can either replace or reinstate an asset in the event of a loss. A valuer is there to determine the sum insured or the loss of or the limit of liability. It's the same meaning. Sum insured or limit of liability. Limit of liability is the maximum that the insurer will pay. So the valuer is responsible for determining the sum insured. The valuer is responsible for determining this limit of liability. And if the sum insured is inadequate, this is what is called the average condition that applies. So the average condition, if the sum is less than the value at risk, the insured shall be considered as its own insurer for the difference in value. And then what then it means is that insurers are going to pay a proportion of that claim. So it's the impact of even underinsurance. If the valuer comes up with figures that are not reflective of the sum insured figures, because those figures upon a loss, the assessor will then come and assess and check how much the value is in terms of at the time of the loss. And if there's a difference, the insurer will pay a portion of that claim. And there is a calculation that is done. The calculation looks at what is the sum insured that has been provided as a percentage of the actual value of the property that was supposed to be used. That percentage is applied to the amount that is being claimed. And that is what the insurers will pay. So this calculation is called the average condition, or is the average clause. So basically what it means is, just as an example, if the client insures for 10,000 instead of insuring for 100,000 in terms of value of those assets, and there is a loss of 20,000, the insurer will pay only 10,000. 10,000 is half of 20,000, which is exactly reflective of what was insured for, which is 50 as a percentage of 100,000, which is supposed to be the correct insurance figure. So you will realize that it doesn't matter that the loss that has happened is actually less than what you have insured for. Even if it's a partial loss, if there is underinsurance, insurers will calculate based on that proportion as well. So that's why it's even very critical for professional valuers to carry out evaluation that is reflective of what the actual sum insured figure should be. Having said that, there are some key takeaways before commencing an insurance valuation. So the key takeaways, the things that we need to look at, the things that we need to take note of are that there are various classes of insurance. So it is necessary to align the evaluation that we are carrying out to those classes of insurance in such a way that the sections where the assets are supposed to be covered under the insurance policy, they are also reflective of your categories in terms of an insurance valuation. Just as an example, there are some standard classifications within the insurance policy. Those classifications are as per below. Just as an example, we've got the buildings that are classified on their own, plant, machinery, and contents on their own. There are other contents that include all those plans, the designs, and other things that are related to personal effects. There is also a class of stock, a class of specifics, but of interest, we are more interested in where plant and machinery assets are. There's also a class that is called planned all risks. So you'll notice that within insurance, there's a class of plant, machinery, and contents that I've mentioned above, and there's this class that it says planned all risks. Planned all risks basically is the mobile equipment that we're talking about, any earth-moving vehicles. When it's in the plant, maybe this relates to forklifts, this relates to excavators, depending on what it is that you are valuing. This relates to anything that is mobile, but necessarily assets that are like vehicles that use the public roads. So these are what we call planned all risks. Those ones will be on their own. So when you are doing evaluation for insurance, necessary to put them on their own, because when it comes to insurance, they are also insured on a separate policy. There is also another category of electronic equipment. These categories, valuers should be aware of them, because when you are valuing, you then know that I'm carrying out evaluation for insurance, I have to put electronic equipment on their own because they are rated differently in terms of insurance. There are other assets that are called business all risks. Business all risks are the portable assets. So you might have your plant and equipment machinery that are portable on a day-to-day basis. You are using them. Let's say it's in the plant, it's the electrical testing equipment or machines that can be moved from one point to another, or that can be taken to site. Very small stuff, portable stuff, but that are plant and machinery. Those assets, they fall under business all risks, and they should be put on their own. So it's necessary to know all these categories of valuation for insurance, because the risk that they are different. So insurers will categorize differently. They would want to know the sum insured figures of these assets differently. So it's always add value if you classify them separately as well in your valuation. Same with motor vehicles. I've indicated that motor vehicles are insured at market values. So you will notice that they will not be combined together with the general plant and machinery that we are talking about, and they have to be put separately. So these are takeaways that we need to know. These are that we need to know before carrying out an insurance valuation. We also need to understand what is covered and what is excluded, as I have indicated before. Understand the basis of valuation, the basis of claim settlement, read the whole policy to understand. All right. So like I indicated, that planned all risks, they've got a special clause that allows for 5-year assets that are beyond 5 years to be insured separate, different to those that are below 5 years. And I've indicated that motor vehicles, they've got market value as the basis of insurance, as of a replacement cost as new. Then in some policies, these are some policies, not all policies. some policies will exclude civils and foundations, depending on which policies, or what has been incorporated in those policies. For valuers to be quite aware of this, they need to know what has been excluded within this policy, and they may be need to classify them separately. And if they are to be included in the policy, they are also rated differently in terms of their risk that can happen. So because they will be rated differently, even if they are in the same policy, there is need to include these separately when you are carrying out valuation for such. Then one other takeaway when it comes to insurance valuation is that although valuation of assets may be necessary, this is basically when you are carrying out a valuation, specifying each asset on its own and giving it a value on its own, although it might be necessary. Although it might not be necessary, there is need to take note of the fact that when it comes to what I've indicated to as the maximum foreseeable loss calculation, the maximum foreseeable loss calculation only applies to a section of the plant. So because it applies to a section of the plant, insurers would want to know how much that section of the plant will be worth. Even the insured that we are carrying out this valuation for, if it's for the insured, they need to know the value that relates to that particular section of the plant. So because of that, usually it is very important to separate plans that do not form a single fire zone or a single risky, that will be affected by a single risk on their own. So there is need to separate the total figures of those plans. So if you have got one section of the plant and it's located adjacent to another, there is need to sometimes separate those values when you are totaling your figure, as opposed to just combining everything. If you combine everything, insurers or even the insured themselves, they might come back to you and say, can you separate the value of this plant? We want to know how much it is on its own. So the reason why they do that is because they will be wanting to calculate this maximum foreseeable loss figure, because sometimes the basis of insurance is also takes into consideration how much that maximum foreseeable figure is. So those are some of the things that are critical to know. And in terms of information that is needed to carry out evaluation, there is need to get a clear instruction or mandate. This one, we all know that this is a very critical aspect. Even in terms of international valuation standards, you have to have a clear instruction, you have to have a clear mandate that makes it clear what the purpose of that valuation is. So the intended purpose should be known, then the valuer will then define the valuation. They will come up with the definition of value. You will then say, is it replacement cost that is needed? Is it market value? That responsibility is for a valuer to come up with that figure. But in terms of what that valuation is for, those insured or the insurers, they will specify the purpose of that valuation. So there is that need to be clear. The purpose of this valuation is clear. When it relates to insurance, I'll give you an example why it's necessary. Some valuations, they might be used even after a loss has happened. You might be required to do a valuation after a loss has already happened, and they want to get any indication of whether there was underinsurance or there was no underinsurance. So all that, it has to be made clear. Then in some instances, evaluation is just to determine whether the correct sum insured is being used. So there is evaluation that can be requested after a loss has happened, and probably that loss is just for a particular section, but they want to have an indication of the value of the whole plant, such that they will have an indication of whether there was under insurance before that. So the intention of that valuation is very important. The purpose is very important. And with that, there's also need to know which assets are to be valued. Take note that missing out assets in your valuation schedules may mean such assets will not be insured. Because remember, I've indicated that clients, they usually attach what they call the policy schedule as part of the insurance policy. And that policy schedule, it sometimes comes from our valuation reports. So your valuation report is used as a schedule during insurance renewal. It is necessary to be careful in terms of making sure that all the assets are included if they are insured. Then the other aspect is it is necessary to get the policy document and the current schedule, take note of the basis of claim settlement, take note of the operating clauses that we're talking about and the exclusions. These things are very important before carrying out an insurance valuation. Get a copy of the existing fixed asset register if it is available. Use it for reconciliation post a site visit. Upon carrying out a site visit, reconcile with the client to ensure all assets are covered. Ensure that the principles of insurance do exist to allow for evaluation of assets on behalf of the insured. In particular, insurable interest. So ensure insurable interest exists. So when you are carrying out evaluation, it is important to know that those assets, if they are owned by the insured, they have to be included within that valuation. If they are under lease, there has to be an insurable interest, or the person insuring should be losing something for that person to be able to insure such an asset. If it's an asset that has been just put in a plant and you are even, there is no insurable interest, there is no loss if it's stolen or if there is destroyed by a fire, if there is no loss that is that affects the insured, then that asset cannot be by the person who is holding that asset. So the renewal date and align it with the asset, the evaluation date, if it is possible. Because these valuations for insurance, sometimes they are used, because they are normally used prior to renewal, you are coming up with some insured figures to allow the client to come up with the correct sum insured figure. It is important to use the asset valuation date that is aligned to the policy renewal date. And if it's used to determine whether there was adequate insurance prior to a loss happening, then that valuation will be as the claim date, as the date of that loss. So it is important to know what the valuation is for and to align the asset date to the needs of that valuation. Then there is need to liaise with building valuers to ensure there is no duplication in double valuation of assets that fall on borderline between buildings and plant and machinery. And on the same note, all assets that are insured should be included for valuation. So anything that is included is within the insurance should also be included within the valuation. Again, like I indicated, know the categories of assets as incorporated in the policy schedule and group them accordingly, right? Then in terms of requirements of the actual report itself, the valuation report, there is need to make sure that all the assets, descriptions, and the specifications, they are included in the valuation report. Description, clear specification. If there are any assets that do exist but have been excluded from the valuation, either because they form part of the policy exclusions or because there is no insurable, this should be made clear in the report. In terms of our opinion on value, again, we indicated it should be aligned to the basis of claim settlement as per the policy wording. And the last item, I will emphasize it again. Although itemization of assets may not be necessary, loss estimates in brackets maximum foreseeable losses should practically be calculated using figures from the valuation report. Plant sections should be totalized separately. Right. So in terms of the reasons for these, for insurance valuation, it is important for us to understand what are the reasons for such a valuation. This valuation for insurance is done to come up with the accurate replacement cost figures, and this leads to an accurate value at risk, and it avoids underinsurance. And again, when there is underinsurance, there is that dreaded average condition that I mentioned, where insurers will just pay a portion of what you have lost. Other reason for valuation is to determine that maximum foreseeable loss that I have mentioned, and to come up with what are normally called disaster recovery scenarios, where clients would want to know and to come up with a plan that will allow them to recover upon a major loss. So they would also want to have an idea of the quantification in terms of value of if they are to be lost, so that they come up with these disaster recovery plans. They come up with details of what they need if it is a major loss. The other reason, it allows insurers to make better insurance decisions. That maximum foreseeable loss calculation that I mentioned, because it represents the highest figure that can happen in terms of losses if there is an incident. So it represents the maximum that an insured can claim based on an incident that would have happened. It gives an indication to insurers the highest that they are able to take if there is a loss. And because insurers are also insured in terms of reinsurance, there are other companies that insure those insurers. So if that figure is calculated, it gives insurers an indication of what they can take, what they can not take, and what they can reinsure. This comes from the maximum foreseeable loss calculation. So this is a figure that comes from evaluation of assets as well. And in addition to that, a detailed asset inventory that would assist with compilation of an insurance claim in the event of a loss is very important to have this. So our asset valuation inventory list, it's important because it allows the claim to be efficiently compiled, because you already know the assets that are there before the loss has happened. So if it's a fire that would have happened, that evaluation will be used in terms of determining what was there before evaluation is occurred. It makes it easier for a claim to be processed. And again, the other reason why we need this valuation is that excessive premiums due to overinsurance, as well as unintended self-insurance through underinsurance, are avoided. So if a client or an insured underinsure, basically if the client uses a figure that is below the value of the property as its sum insured, the result of that is an intentional self-insurance. The other basically carrying the risk yourself as the insured. So because of that, that will be what will be called an intentional self-insurance. But on the other end, if clients use a figure that is way higher than what the sum insured should be, insurers are not pay for that high figure again. So that valuation is necessary because it reflects what the replacement cost will be if it is a valuation that is professionally done, where the insured determine on their own and come up with a figure. If it's way higher, there is a loss. If there is a loss that happens, insurers will not pay for that extra figure. They will only pay for what it is when it comes to the actual value during the loss. They will calculate that value during the loss, and they will then give what is commensurate with whatever you would have lost. You are not supposed to gain or to lose because of insurance. Insurance is meant to indemnify the insured, put back the insured on the same position that they were before a loss. So the other reason for insurance is the insurance market, they look favorably to clients that value their assets. And obviously, internal staff, which is in relation to the insured people or the clients that we are talking about, they are relieved of this extra responsibility of determining some insured figures. So these are some of the reasons why insurance valuation is necessary. And just to quickly go through the actual valuation process itself, the actual valuation process, it involves inception meetings, data collection, and obviously this should be upon discussions with the client, which is the insured. And before that has been done, to identify the areas where you are supposed to carry out this valuation, do all those meetings, come up, if there are already existing asset registers, if those existing asset registers have a list of additions and disposals, especially the last 3 years, they have to be considered so that when you get in there to actually carry out an asset inventory, you have got an idea of what is that you are being faced with. And that's the whole process. It's part of the inception and the data collection process. Then in terms of the actual field inspections, it is necessary to record all the assets, sometimes on a line-by-line basis, obviously grouping those that are like small tools and workshop equipment and all this. And what is expected in terms of insurance valuation is to specify the asset type, to specify the description, asset numbers if they are there, technical specifications, these are necessary, functionality as well, model and manufacturer, serial numbers, location, capacity, especially where the machine is to be replaced by a reconditioned second-hand. There can be those instances where a special request is there to replace a machine with a second-hand. So all these are supposed to be included, and they are very necessary to allow someone or a valuer to come up with a replacement cost new or reproduction cost new, and to come up with all those figures that are relevant. You find that in terms of this, we then get into the replacement cost or price research, which is undertaken usually probably from cost databases or inquiries from suppliers. And that's the replacement costs, gross replacement costs of plant and machinery. This will be looked at from the perspective of estimating the cost of acquiring a new or modern substitute asset, having the same productive capacity as the existing, together with the associated expenses directly related to the installation of the asset. So this is the replacement cost that is very relevant when it comes to insurance valuation. And obviously, after carrying out that, the final report in terms of valuation of plant and machinery would be looking at completion of a price research, report writing, that will be computed sometimes on item by item. Although like I indicated, this is not very critical when it comes to insurance valuation, but what is important is to categorize the different plans that are sitting on as different fire zones on their own. Then the report will be compiled, and it including things like asset number, asset description, asset category. Asset category is important for insurance valuation. Again, I indicated that you can classify your assets. If it's a mining plant, maybe you can say crushing plant assets or mobile plant, depending on what it is that is there in terms of those categories. These categories are necessary because when it comes to valuation, they are rated differently. The premiums of these are different. So this categorization is important from that regard. The make, the model, the serial number, and the actual gross replacement cost, it's important to include this. So insurance valuation different from the general other valuations that we are normally faced with? You will notice that there is that domain knowledge that is important. Knowledge of the insurance policies is important. Relevance of insurance valuation is also required. For you to come up with an insurance valuation that is relevant, you have to know what is covered in these insurance policies. You have to know what is the relevance of your valuation to the whole insurance valuation perspective. You also have to know the basis of this valuation. So the basis of this valuation is different. In other valuations that we carry out, we normally look at the three methodologies of valuation. In this instance, when it comes to insurance valuation, all that is not relevant. There is no need to come up with the three methodologies of valuation that we normally look at. No need to do the market approach, sales comparison approach, or income approach, the cost approach as well. There's no need to do the cost approach, the sales comparison, and the income approach. So there is only need to come up with replacement cost figures that are relevant to that are there. All these methodologies are not necessary. And the other aspect of insurance valuation is that the actual year of purchase or the condition of asset is not even very relevant. It's only relevant in some instances, depending on the what it is that is the basis of valuation. If the basis of valuation is new for old, you don't even need to really consider the purchase the year, because we are looking at generally replacing new assets, and that is the basis that is normally there, except for items like motor vehicles, and except for mobile equipment that I said, those that are normally older than 5 years are based on market values, or except for special assets like aircrafts that I said, they are based on agreed values. Otherwise, when it comes to the general machinery and equipment assets, there's not even need to look at when that asset was purchased. So with that, we'll quickly go through a typical case that looks at how replacement costs for purposes of insurance can be calculated. So we've got a company X. Company X, it has requested a valuation of assets. It has requested that valuation for its brick-making plant for purpose of insurance renewal. The plant was purchased about 3 years ago for about 150,000 SAR, a free on-board factory. Then the purchase price of such plants by 10%. The current freight costs are estimated to be 5% of the purchase price. Current installed and commission costs are 40,000. Value-added tax is at 15%. The insurance policy is a provision for new for old. Then you are required to provide an opinion of value that should be used as the sum insured of this plant. And we are assuming that there is no betterment in respect of the capacity of the current replacement plant, because obviously if there is betterment, there will be a deduction of that betterment when it comes to insurance. And that company X is not yet registered with the VAT authority, and hence cannot claim a VAT charge. So we are required to come up with the typical opinion of value that we'll come up with based on this case study. So there are things that we need to look at. The things that we need to look at in this case study are the historical cost of the plant, which is at 150,000. Since the current price or the current price of this plant is at 10% more than, we calculate the current price is under 10% of that cost, sorry, which is 165,000. This is the FOB cost. We add in commissioning costs. Also point out that here, if we were given, let's say, expenses that are related to duty, if you are importing this client or this equipment from another country, just as an example, we also add in all those. Those are relevant costs as well, because the replacement cost, it includes all those costs that add into the final figure for insurance purposes. Commissioning costs, we now add commissioning costs at 40,000. We come up with the total figure before the 205,000 after adding the FOB cost to the commissioning costs. We have indicated that VAT is at 15%. We calculate our VAT 15% of that 205,000. We get 30,750. But what is necessary to note there is that the VAT costs cannot be recovered, because we have indicated that this company is not registered for VAT. So because it's not recoverable, that part of VAT has to be added in our replacement cost new figure, right? Then we then say our sum insured is now 205,000 plus that VAT portion to come up with 275,750. So that will be the cost that we will use for replacement in terms of using it as the sum insured for insurance. With that, the last part of our presentation, I now take questions from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. That was an excellent presentation. Now we want to leave this time for questions. I've got one question here. I hope Ahmed, you are going to help me with the Arabic questions. Maybe you can translate them and put them on the chat so that I can read them. Or you can help me by reading them so that we can move on quickly. Please, how do you approach valuation for business or risks insurance?
Okay. When we talk of business or risks insurance, we are talking of those equipment that are portable. They are not really fixed on the same position. These are the portables that we were talking about. And you find that obviously sometimes in terms of physically recording those assets, they might not be on site. So it's always necessary to try and optimize to be able to see as much as you can in terms of recording those assets. But in reality, it is given, there is no way someone will be able to see all those movable or the portable small equipment that are scattered around the plant. It may not be very possible to see all of them. So after having recorded all the assets that you can physically see, there is always that aspect of checking with the plant engineers, checking with the guys that are responsible for those assets to get a full list of those assets, such that in some instances we have to justify on the specifications, the detail that you get from the assets, from the engineers. But if you value assets that you would not have physically seen, it's important to disclose that in the valuation report and put it there that this asset was not available at time of valuation. I'm taking it that probably that's where the basis of that person is. I'm not sure whether the person who has asked the question has been fully answered, or maybe I would need clarity in terms of whether that is the perspective of the question.
I hope so too. And do you have situations where the insured will insist on a policy for old, for new, for motor vehicle insurance?
Yeah, that one, that can be a problem, because the reason why I say it's a problem is that almost globally, the policies that exist for motor vehicles, they are based on market values because the comparables are there. So if the insurer, if the client insists on the replacement as new, that might, insurers, they usually raise questions in terms of why the insistence, because that might give an indication as if someone would want to fraudulently claim for higher figures, where you then say, I've got a vehicle, then you say, I've lost my vehicle. Then when claiming, you are now getting more than what you can get. So it becomes a problem, because that can be a challenge. I haven't really seen such an incident where a client insists on insuring based on replacement costs when it comes to motor vehicles. But if it happens, what it also entails is that it can be a subject of raising a worry. But what it also entails is that the client itself would have to pay a premium that is slightly higher, because the replacement cost figures are higher than market values, because they will be looking at replacement as new. So I don't know why someone would then be requiring to do that, unless there are models that are designed to do that, as in the case of the other planned equipment, because they are the ones that are based on new for old. for motor vehicles, the models that are used by insurers at the moment, they are for market values.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Thanks for the seminar, speaker. For debris removal insurance that covers the cost and expenses of removing debris, what is the benchmark that can be used to estimate the pre-loss cost of debris removal? Did you get my question?
Yes, yes, okay. In terms of debris removal, I obviously it would depend on the location of the plant itself. There are several things that can determine or affect that. But what I can also say is, in terms of insurance, they usually have just a general guideline as a percentage of the value of the assets. Plus or minus, they can say 10% as debris removal, but it's not something that is cast in stone, because it's not a scientific calculation. It's an allowance that can be given to say, when you are removing this debris, what is likely to be the percentage, but you realize that it depends with the plant that you are talking about. If it's something that is that does not have an installation that is firmly fixed on the ground, maybe just, I'll give you an example. Let's say you are doing evaluation of blow molding machines and injection molding machines. Those assets, if there is a loss, chances are that the debris removal in terms of a figure is less than, let's say, a plant that is firmly fixed in the ground, like a refinery, an oil refinery, for example. The debris removal for that is likely to be more. So I wouldn't say there is a science to it, or a percentage, a cast in stone percentage to it, but it's just an allowance that will be on a case by case, and obviously discussing with the insurers and looking with the insured as well, and looking at how much in terms of the typical installations that are like that, how much would the clearing of the ground and everything would be in relation to the whole plant.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got another question. What is the best in the case of parts of the origin, but the best can be evaluated before and after the fire? What is the best in the case of parts, maybe of the plants of the origin, I think, but the best can be evaluated before and after the fire? The question, I don't know if you have deduced something out of this. I'm
struggling
to. Let's hold that one. Let's hold that one. Maybe you rephrase this question. Let's look at this one. What is the appropriate depreciation method when evaluating for insurance purposes?
When evaluating plant and machinery for insurance purposes, the general policies that are there, the all risks policies that I was talking about, in the fire and allied policies, you don't even consider depreciation, because remember, we are talking of new for old, right? So depreciation is not considered. You are not really looking at deducting any depreciation unless there is a special policy that might require that, right? So let's take note that when we are doing valuation for insurance, all the discussions that we're having, in general, it's new for old. In general, it's gross replacement cost is new. So we are not talking of depreciation. So you only talk of that when there is a when there is a special policy that is based on depreciation. And you will find that if you are to take several global policies that are there, that policy, it doesn't normally exist in a number of countries. Usually insurance is new for all, but in instances where there is that aspect of saying you consider depreciation, the procedures that you then follow is those standard ways of calculating, let's say you are now going into the issues of calculating market value by cost approach, by income approach, by a sales comparison approach. You are now doing evaluation that is more like aligned to what it is after considering the physical obsolescence, the technical obsolescence the functional obsolescence that we normally talk about when we are doing other evaluations. So you are now looking at those models where you then look at it from a perspective of saying, if I'm going to deduct physical deterioration, am I going to use the age life analysis? Am I going to use any other model that you will use? Those are the things that you then consider, but it will be like a fully fledged evaluation process that considers all the three models, all the three methodologies of evaluation that we normally go through.
Okay, thank you. And another question, how do we calculate the value of a new product with the same specifications as the old original?
You are looking at, basically you are looking at inquiring even with the suppliers. That's why when you go to site, you are recording a make, model, description, serial number of that asset. Then in terms of the capacity as well, then you then look at the supplier. Is this asset still in existence? You check with the suppliers the cost of replacing those as new, right? So you then add in all the other relevant additional costs. If it's that, if you get a value, let's say X works, X factory of the supplier, you are now going to look at all the other additional costs that are relevant to that, freight costs, duty, and all those that we were talking about. So basically it's checking with the suppliers, does it exist? If it doesn't exist, look at a similar one that has got the same capacity, because obviously you would have recorded the capacity, the specifications of that asset. So you are now going back to the suppliers of those assets or similar assets, and you check in there with the suppliers of those to come up with the replacement cost figure. So basically that's what you look at from an insurance point of view.
Okay, thank you. Another question, does the insurance cover the value of stopping production?
The value of stopping production. Cover.
Yes.
Yeah, the value of stopping production. Okay, there are various classes of insurance that are there. The value of stopping production is covered if that stopping of production is as a result of what we call an insured peril. Let's say if it's as a result of a fire, let's say there's a fire, then that production stops as a result of a fire. So I'm assuming the very first thing that we are talking about is, I hope the person who has asked the question is talking about if there is an incident that is insured, right? So if there is a fire, because it can't be just stopping production without any incident happening, without a loss happening. So if it's stopping production because there has been a fire, there has to be a triggering event there has to be something that causes a loss for insurance to kick in. So first, there has to be that activity. So there has to be a loss. So if there is a fire and there is stopping of production, yes, insurance can cover stopping of production, but that's a separate insurance cover that is called loss of profits, right? So that one, the loss of profits, it is now nothing to do with what we're calculating, because what we were talking about is what is called property damage. So insurance has got a class, it will pay for property damage, but it will also pay for loss of profits. So yes, it does. And loss of profits, or what is called business interruption, is another class of insurance, but it's not like when you are doing evaluation, you incorporate that figure into your replacement costs.
Okay, thank you. I still have a couple of questions. And this one, please, how do you approach valuation? Oh, we have covered that one, valuation for business or risk insurance, right? So I've got another question on the chat. Here in Nigeria, there are machinery that has completed its life cycle before being shipped to Nigeria. These machines are then recalibrated in some way and it works perfectly. In this situation, how do you advise we value this machinery? Or how do we value this machinery? Your advice.
Okay, so okay, I'm not sure I completely got the question, but I'm assuming this is an asset that has got a specific capacity, and it has been recalibrated, meaning that I'm assuming the capacity has probably changed. If that is what I'm getting when you say it has been recalibrated, is it like if it's like, let's say you've got a boiler that has got a certain tonnage, then because of something else, it has been downgraded. It's now, its output has changed. It's now lower than what it was. If that is the case, then remember when you are doing evaluation, you are looking at replacing with an that has got a similar output, a similar capacity. So whatever that output is what you are now considering in terms of replacement. Right? So those are the things in terms of insurance. So insurance will be considering two things. Insurance will consider, remember we're talking about a replacement versus a reinstatement. So when you are looking at insurance, the policy will be saying the insurer can either replace or reinstate. So because of that, the insurer will choose the lower of the two figures. So if there is a comparable that has got a lower capacity, that has got same capacity, but it's now a different make, and it has got a lower replacement cost, that's the figure that insurance uses. Compared to, let's say it's the same asset that has been downgraded, compared to a reproduction cost figure, where you are now looking at how much would it be to produce the same asset, even though it's downgraded. So insurance will compare those two figures and they will use the lower of the two, which is replacement. So the new capacity is the one that is relevant.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question, does Taqeem cover insurance valuation of plants and machinery? If yes, does it mean all such reports need to undergo Taqeem review? Right, I think that one I'll answer it for Taqeem. Yes, it's part of valuation, it falls under Taqiim. It's covered under Taqiim, and the reports must be submitted for review, just like any other valuation that you do. In terms of accredited valuers law, which is governing all the activities in Saudi Arabia regarding the valuations, yes, you are supposed to do that. You are supposed to submit all the reports for whatever purpose, they are supposed to be submitted and into Kima, that is our platform for review. That is the case. Thank you so much. I think that one is answered. And I have one last question. Is there a way for a representative from the insurance company to accompany us so that together we define the criteria for dividing the assets and the risk associated with each asset, and what the policy can cover and what cannot be covered?
Okay. Yeah. I must say, in terms of the insurance policy, the person insured or the company insured, which we call the insured in terms of the actual name, is the one who is supposed to provide replacement cost figures. So it is the duty of whoever is insured to provide the figures. It's not the duty of the insurance company. So the insurance company will just take a figure that comes from the client to say, the client will be saying, I did my valuation, this is my figure, right? So when you talk of accompanying, usually insurers are not concerned about that. They only get concerned after a loss has happened. So we can talk of it about that, at least from the side of the insured, which is the client taking insurance, and whether they are willing to discuss with you in terms of categorization. And that one, I would say, when you go for asset valuation for purposes of insurance, it is important to sit down with the insured and look at that policy and define those categories and produce a report that is got those categories. Right? So this is the insured, not the insurance company, because the insurance company is not usually in the picture before a loss has happened. They are not interested. They only take the declared figures. They only take the policy schedule, the schedule that is attached to the policy. So the requirements of categorization usually comes from the insured. I don't know whether that has been answered.
Yes, it is answered. One last question. I think there's a question which has just come lately, but we can answer it. Thank you, Mr. Lecturer and organizers of this lecture. There is no mention of depreciation in the case study. Why?
Yeah, you see, like what I was saying, the insurance valuation, if you check the policies that you have in the various countries, I urge you to just get one policy of insurance, try go read what it is saying, especially under the provision that says a claim settlement. And you realize that valuation for insurance depreciation is not relevant in general, unless the policy has specifically indicated that it's based on depreciated figure. But that is not the norm in insurance valuation. So that's why depreciation is not even that relevant in insurance valuation. Please, if you were valuing and you were depreciating, I would urge you to first check the policy before coming up with the valuation for insurance. Check the policy first. you realize that in most instances, it's new for old. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel Karidzا, for sharing your information and knowledge about insurance valuation. And we've come to our end, viewers and audience. Thank you very much for joining. See you in the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.